There is a specific kind of pain that comes from betrayal by someone who knows everything about you, not a stranger, not an acquaintance, someone who has sat across from you at 1,000 dinners. Someone who knows the name of your childhood dog and the story of your worst heartbreak and the exact way you take your coffee. Someone who has held your secrets so long that you stopped thinking of them as secrets at all. They were just things that two people knew because two people were that close. When that person decides to use what they know against you, not in anger, not in a single moment of terrible judgment, but deliberately, strategically over weeks and months, the damage they can do is not like any other damage. Because they know exactly where to aim. My name is Zoe. And for 8 years, my best friend was a woman named Amber. We met in college, built our friendship through our 20s, shared apartments and holidays and every significant event of our adult lives. She spent the better part of a year spreading lies about me to everyone we knew. Our mutual friends, my colleagues, my boyfriend, anyone who would listen. I found out on a Wednesday in October. And what I did next, what I chose deliberately and completely not to do, is the thing I am most proud of in this entire story. I did not fight back. I did not confront her publicly. I did not match what she had done with anything that looked like it. I walked away, completely, permanently, and I built something in the silence she left behind that she could not have destroyed even if she had tried. Stay with me. Because the ending is not what you think walking away looks like. Amber and I met during freshman orientation at college. We were assigned to the same small group activity, one of those forced icebreaker exercises that are designed to be awkward and mostly succeed. And somehow, in the middle of the awkwardness, we found each other's humor at exactly the same moment and laughed at exactly the same thing. That was it. That was the whole beginning. A shared laugh at a bad icebreaker. We were inseparable for the next 4 years of college and the 4 years after that. We lived together for 2 of those years. An apartment that was small enough that we developed the specific shorthand of people who share a kitchen and a bathroom and learn each other's rhythms down to the sound of footsteps. We were in each other's corner for everything. Job losses, relationship ends, family difficulties, the particular shapelessness of your mid-20s when you are trying to figure out who you are and what you are building. I was her maid of honor when she got married at 27. She was mine when the relationship I had been in fell apart 6 months before we would have done the same. She sat on my kitchen floor with me that night and did not say a single thing about silver linings, and I have never forgotten that. By the time we were 30, Amber was married with a son and working part-time at a company she found tolerable but not fulfilling. I was single, fully career-focused, at a company I genuinely loved, and as of the January that starts this story, newly promoted to a senior role that I had worked toward for 2 years. I told Amber about the promotion over dinner the week it was announced. She hugged me. She said all the right things. What I did not see, what I could not have seen, sitting across from 8 years of friendship, was the thing moving behind her eyes when I described what the promotion meant. I found out what that thing was much later. By then, it had already done its damage. It started with things I could not quite locate. A slight coolness in a group of mutual friends that I could not explain. A conversation that stopped when I walked into a room. A text from someone in our circle that was friendly enough on the surface but had an undertone I could not identify, a carefulness that had not been there before. I noticed but did not name it for several weeks. In retrospect, the not naming was its own kind of denial. I think some part of me understood that naming it would require me to follow it somewhere I did not want to go. Then Ryan, my boyfriend at the time, asked me something on a Sunday evening that I still remember with complete clarity. We were doing nothing in particular, watching something neither of us was paying attention to, and he turned to me and said very carefully, "Has something been going on at work?" "Something you haven't told me?" I said no. I asked why. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said he had heard something he would not say from whom, not then, about a situation at my office. Something about my conduct with a colleague. Something that implied I had behaved in a way that had caused a problem. Nothing like what he was describing had happened. There was no situation. There was no colleague and no conduct and no problem. I told him that clearly and watched his face for whether he believed me. He said he believed me. But the fact that he had asked, the fact that whatever he had heard had been credible enough to make him ask, told me something had been put into the world that had my name on it. I called Cara that night. Cara was a mutual friend who had been close to both Amber and me since college, someone I trusted with a directness that most people did not offer. I asked her plainly if she had heard anything about me that I should know about. There was a pause that lasted slightly too long, then she said, "Zoe, I think we need to meet in person." We met at a coffee shop on a Wednesday morning. Cara arrived first and had already ordered and was holding her cup in both hands in the way she did when she was uncomfortable. I had known her long enough to read that. She told me everything she knew. And what she knew was more than I had prepared myself for. For at least 8 months beginning, as best Cara could trace it, in the weeks after my promotion, Amber had been telling people things. Different things to different people, calibrated carefully to the audience. To our mutual friends, she had been suggesting that my career success had changed me, that I had become dismissive and self-centered and difficult to be around, citing specific incidents that had either not happened or had been so distorted from reality that I barely recognized them. To people who knew me professionally through mutual connections, she had been implying something about my work conduct, nothing specific enough to be directly refuted, but specific enough to plant doubt. To Ryan, through a conversation Cara believed had happened at a gathering I had not attended, she had said something about my fidelity that she had framed as concern, and not wanting to cause trouble in the specific way that is designed to cause maximum trouble while providing deniability. Cara had believed some of it initially. She said that clearly and without excuse. The way Amber had delivered it with apparent reluctance, with the framing of someone who hated to say it, had made it convincing. It was only when she had heard the same story told to 2 different people in slightly different versions that she had started to question it. And then she had started to pay attention. And what she had seen, paying attention, was a pattern. She put her phone on the table. She had screenshots. Not of everything, she had not been surveilling Amber, but of 2 conversations in a group chat she shared with several mutual friends, where Amber had said things that Cara had screenshotted at the time with a vague instinct that they might matter later. They mattered now. I read them in a coffee shop on a Wednesday morning and understood, in the specific clarity of seeing something written down that you had been trying not to know, exactly what had been happening and exactly how long it had been happening and exactly who had been doing it. I put the phone down, I picked up my coffee, I held it with both hands the way Cara had been holding hers. "How many people," I asked, "do you think have heard some version of this?" Cara was honest, she said. "Most of our shared circle, probably some people outside it, possibly Ryan in more detail than he had told me." I sat with that for a long moment, then I said, "Okay, thank you for telling me." Cara looked at me carefully. "What are you going to do?" I did not answer immediately, because I did not know yet. But something was already forming in me, not anger exactly, though the anger was there, something quieter and more certain than anger. I was going to do nothing, not nothing in the passive sense, nothing in the deliberate, chosen, strategic sense. I was going to remove myself so completely from Amber's orbit that she would have nothing left to aim at. I want to explain this decision carefully because I think it is the most important part of this entire story, and it is also the part most likely to be misunderstood. I did not choose silence because I was afraid of confrontation. I am not someone who avoids conflict by nature. Anyone who knows me would tell you that. I did not choose silence because I believed I had nothing to say or because I thought Amber deserved protection. I chose silence because I understood something, sitting in that coffee shop with Cara's phone in my hands, that I think takes most people years to learn and some people never learn at all. Engaging with what Amber had done, confronting her publicly, fighting the rumors point by point, explaining myself to every person she had reached, would have required me to make her the center of my attention and my energy for months. It would have kept me permanently in the story she had written, defending myself against a narrative I had not authored and did not control. Every response would have been processed through the filter of the story she had already told. Every defense would have looked like proof to the people who had already decided to believe her. And every day I spent fighting it would have been a day I was not building the thing I actually wanted to be building. The best response to someone who tries to define you with their words is to define yourself with your actions over a long enough period that their words become irrelevant. Not immediately, not quickly, but eventually, permanently. I decided in that coffee shop that I was going to execute that decision completely. No partial exit, no lingering access, no slow fade that left a door open for more. I texted Amber that afternoon. One message, brief. I told her I knew what had happened and that I was removing myself from her life. I did not ask for an explanation. I did not list what she had done. I did not tell her what I was going to do next or what I hoped would happen to her. I said, I know, I'm done, I wish you well. She replied 4 times over the next 2 days. I read none of the replies. I blocked her on everything, not out of anger, but because access was over, and access being over needed to be structural, not dependent on my daily decision to ignore her. Then I put my phone down and went back to work. I want to be honest about what the immediate aftermath looked like, because the version where my decision was immediately validated would be dishonest. Some friendships did not survive. 3 people in our mutual circle chose Amber, not dramatically, not with a declaration, but in the quiet way of people who find it easier to believe the version of a story they heard first. I lost those friendships. I will not pretend that did not cost something, because it did. Ryan and I had a long conversation about what Amber had told him. He was honest with me, more honest than I had expected, about the specific things she had implied and about the fact that he had, briefly, entertained doubt. I appreciated the honesty. But honesty about having doubted someone because of deliberate lies told by their closest friend is not the same as those doubts never having existed. Some things, once they enter a relationship, change its shape in ways that don't fully reverse. Ryan and I ended things 2 months after the conversation with Cara, not in anger, not because of a single moment. Because I had seen, in how easily Amber's words had landed, something about the foundation of what Ryan and I had that I could not unsee. I was 30 years old, single, and with a significantly smaller social circle than I had started the year with. What I also had was clarity. The specific, clean clarity of someone who has removed everything from their life that was performing the function of support without actually providing it. The friendships that remained after everything, Cara, 2 others, my mother, were the real ones. The ones that had been tested and had held. And I had the job, the promotion I had worked for. The work I was genuinely good at and genuinely cared about. The thing Amber had tried to reach into and damage, and had not, because the people I worked with had seen my work directly and not through anyone else's description of it. David, my manager, called me into his office about 3 weeks after everything came to a head. I had been quietly anxious about whether anything had reached the professional world in a way that had registered there. He said, I want you to know that I've heard some noise from outside the company about you through a mutual connection. I don't know the details and I'm not asking. What I know is what I see here every day. And what I see here every day is someone who does the work. That's what matters to me. He did not make it a bigger moment than it was. He moved on to the actual meeting agenda within 30 seconds. It was exactly what I needed to hear, delivered in exactly the right way. Here is what I did with the time and energy I had been spending managing Amber's friendship for, I realized, looking back, probably the last 2 years. I finished a certification I had been putting off for 18 months. I took on 2 projects at work that were outside my immediate scope, but that I had wanted to pursue and had been too time pressured to approach. I started running in the mornings, not dramatically, not a marathon, just 30 minutes alone before the day started, which gave me something that I can only describe as a daily reminder that my body was functional and capable and mine. I redecorated my apartment. I know that sounds small. It is not small. For years my apartment had reflected a version of me that had been assembled with other people's input, including Amber's, who had strong opinions about everything and whose opinions I had absorbed without examining whether they matched mine. Taking that apart and rebuilding it according to my own taste was a physical enactment of the same thing I was doing everywhere else. I started spending more time with Cara, who had proven herself in the specific way that matters, by telling me the truth when it was uncomfortable. Our friendship became the closest it had ever been, precisely because it had been tested and had held. Months passed. Then a year. The noise Amber had created, the whispers, the implications, the carefully constructed alternative version of me she had distributed to our social circle, began to do what all noise does when it is not fed new energy. It faded, not because people forgot, but because I had spent a year being, publicly and consistently, exactly who I was. And eventually, not quickly, but eventually, who you are in practice becomes louder than what someone said about you in theory. I want to be careful here. Not to protect Amber, I am past that, but because I think accuracy matters more than a satisfying narrative, and the satisfying narrative would require me to exaggerate. Here is what I know, through Cara and through the small remaining overlap of our social circles. Amber's marriage, which had appeared stable from the outside, went through a significant crisis about a year after everything happened. I do not know the details and do not want to. It is not information I sought, and it is not something I feel any satisfaction about. A marriage in difficulty is not karma, it is just a painful human situation, and she is still a person inside it. What I do know, and what Cara told me because she thought I deserved to know, is that several of the people in our mutual circle who had initially believed Amber's version of things eventually stopped believing it. Not because of anything I did. Because Amber, freed from the moderating influence of a close friend who had spent 8 years privately smoothing her rougher edges, had continued to be who she was with the people around her. And who she was, without anyone buffering it, had become visible in ways it had not been before. People's patterns do not change because they have successfully aimed them at one target. They continue. And continued patterns over time become undeniable to the people experiencing them. 2 of the friends I had lost came back, not dramatically. One sent a message that said simply, "I should have asked you directly. I'm sorry." The other showed up at an event and talked to me for an hour, and we never explicitly addressed what had happened because we did not need to. I accepted both without making them perform additional remorse. They had seen what they had seen and updated accordingly. That was enough. What I did not do was rebuild the friendships to what they had been before. They are cordial now, warm, even. But the full trust that existed before is not something that reinstalls itself automatically with an apology. That is not bitterness, it is accuracy. Trust is built over time and it rebuilds over time, and I am honest with myself about where we are in that process. It has been 2 years since the Wednesday morning in the coffee shop with Cara. I was promoted again 8 months ago, a role that expanded my scope significantly, and that David recommended me for in terms that, when he told me what he had written, made me sit quietly for a moment and feel something I cannot fully name. It was the professional validation I had worked toward. But more than that, it was confirmation of something I had chosen to believe about myself during the period when someone was actively trying to make me believe the opposite. I am not with Ryan. I have been on several dates since and am currently in something early and careful and honest with someone who has none of Ryan's specific weakness and several qualities I did not know to look for until I understood what their absence had cost me. I am not ready to name it publicly, and I do not think I need to. My apartment looks like me. My mornings are mine. My friendships are smaller in number and larger in quality than they have ever been. I think about Amber occasionally, less than I did, and differently than I did. In the early months, I thought about her with the hot anger of someone who has been genuinely wronged. Now I think about her with something more like sad curiosity, the specific bewilderment of not being able to fully understand why someone who had been given 8 years of genuine friendship would choose to spend it the way she spent the last part of it. I do not have a satisfying answer. I have a theory that the promotion triggered something in her that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with her own relationship with herself and what she had or had not built. But a theory is not an answer, and I have made peace with not having the answer. Some things you do not get to understand completely. You get to move past them anyway. I called this story "She Walked Away and Never Looked Back." I want to address that directly because I think the phrase gets used in a way that implies a kind of effortless, cinematic closure.